The rain fell in sheets against the cracked window of my studio apartment, each drop a tiny hammer against the glass. 3 months in this forgotten corner of Chicago, and I still jolted at every sound. My fingers trembled as I applied concealer to the fading yellow bruise below my left eye, the last gift Ryan had given me before I escaped. Just temporary, I whispered to my reflection, the words becoming a mantra. The studio apartment with its peeling wallpaper and temperamental plumbing was just temporary. The nightmares that jolted me awake, heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird, temporary. The constant looking over my shoulder, temporary. At least that's what I told myself. I tucked a strand of copper hair behind my ear and assessed my appearance. Green eyes dulled by exhaustion, cheekbones too prominent from weeks of forgetting to eat, clothes hanging loose on my once curved frame. The woman in the mirror was a stranger, a ghost of who I used to be before Ryan had systematically dismantled every piece of me. My phone buzzed, and my heart seized before I remembered he couldn't reach me here. I'd changed my number, deleted my social media, even dyed my naturally blonde hair this rusty copper shade. The text was from Mia, my only friend in the city. Got you that job interview, Vertigo. 7 p.m. tonight. Don't be late. Wear something nice. Vertigo, supposedly one of the most exclusive bars in the city. Mia had mentioned knowing someone who could get me in. The tips alone could help me save enough to move somewhere Ryan would never find me. Somewhere I could start over properly. I pulled out the only dress I'd brought with me when I fled. A simple black number that hugged what curves I had left. Another gift from Ryan, but I couldn't afford to be precious about it. Not when I needed this job so desperately. The rain had eased by the time I stepped onto the street, but the evening air still clung to my skin, humid and oppressive. I clutched my tattered umbrella like a shield as I navigated the unfamiliar neighborhood. Mia had drawn me a map, marking shortcuts through alleys I'd normally avoid. But tonight, I couldn't afford to be late. Vertigo rose before me like something from another world, sleek obsidian glass and chrome. A modern fortress nestled between crumbling brick buildings. A line of beautiful people wrapped around the block, all sharp angles and expensive perfume. I gripped my resume tighter, suddenly aware of my chipped nail polish and the small scuff on my second-hand heels. The bouncer, a mountain of a man with hands the size of dinner plates, blocked my path. Back of the line, he grunted without looking at me. I swallowed hard, my voice emerging smaller than I intended. I'm here for an interview. Mia sent me. Something flickered in his eyes at the mention of Mia's name. He scrutinized me for a moment, then stepped aside with a curt nod toward a discreet side entrance. Through there. Ask for Anton. The side door opened into a dimly lit hallway that smelled of expensive liquor and subtle cologne. The bass from the club pulsed through the walls, vibrating beneath my feet as I made my way deeper into the building. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a warning I couldn't quite decipher. A young woman with a sleek black bob and winged eyeliner sharp enough to cut glass appeared at the end of the corridor. You must be Ellie, she said, her eyes sweeping over me with clinical precision. I'm Vivian. Anton's busy. I'll take you to his office. I followed her through a labyrinth of hallways, each one drawing us further from the throbbing heart of the club. The walls transitioned from exposed brick to smooth, dark wood. The music faded, replaced by a weighted silence that pressed against my ears. Wait here. Vivian stopped before a polished door and knocked twice before disappearing inside. The hallway stretched empty in both directions, adorned only with tasteful, abstract art pieces that probably cost more than my entire life savings. I shifted my weight from one foot to the other, trying to ignore the mounting pressure in my chest, the voice in my head that whispered I didn't belong here. The door opened, and Vivian emerged. He'll see you now. The office beyond was spacious and dimly lit, dominated by a massive desk of dark wood. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the glittering cityscape, raindrops racing down the glass like liquid diamonds, and behind the desk, empty. Mr. Sokolov will be with you shortly, Vivian said, gesturing to a leather chair positioned before the desk. Please, make yourself comfortable. Alone, I perched on the edge of the chair, too tense to sink into its embrace. My eyes darted around the room, cataloging details, The lack of personal photos, the meticulous organization, the subtle scent of sandalwood and something sharper, metallic. Everything about the space spoke of power and control, reminding me uncomfortably of Ryan's obsessively neat apartment. I was reaching into my bag for my resume when I heard it, the soft click of the door opening behind me. The hair on my arms rose before I even turned around, some primitive part of my brain recognizing a predator in the room. Miss Eleanor Hayes. His voice slid over my skin like silk-wrapped steel, deep, accented, but with perfect diction that spoke of an expensive education. I rose and turned in one motion, my carefully rehearsed greeting dying on my lips. He was younger than I expected, early 30s perhaps, and devastatingly handsome in a way that felt dangerous rather than approachable. Dark hair swept back from a face of sharp angles and shadows. Eyes so intensely blue they seemed to glow in the dim light. His suit was clearly bespoke, molding to broad shoulders and a lean frame with the devotion of a worshipper. But it wasn't his appearance that stole my breath. It was the way he looked at me, like he was seeing through me, past the carefully constructed facade to the fractured pieces beneath. Like he recognized me, though we'd never met. Mr. Sokolov, I managed, extending my hand on autopilot. Thank you for seeing me. He moved toward me with the fluid grace of a predator. No wasted motion. His hand engulfed mine, warm and dry, his grip firm without being crushing. Unlike Ryan, who'd always squeezed too hard, a subtle reminder of his strength. Anton, please. A smile curved his lips, but never reached his eyes. Those remained fixed on mine, assessing. Mia speaks highly of you. I wondered what exactly Mia had told him, what secrets she'd shared in her effort to help me. The thought made my skin crawl. Please sit. He gestured to the chair I'd vacated, circling around to lean against the front of his desk, rather than retreating behind it. The position left him looming over me. A power play so subtle I almost missed it. Tell me why you want to work at Vertigo, Eleanor. He tilted his head slightly, studying me with unnerving intensity. I'd practiced this answer, crafted it carefully to sound enthusiastic without appearing desperate. But under his gaze, the rehearsed words dissolved on my tongue. I need a fresh start, I said instead, honesty spilling out before I could catch it. And I've heard the tips here are good. Something flashed in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or amusement. Refreshingly direct. Most people try to impress me with flowery declarations of passion for mixology. I should have said something witty or charming then, something to secure this job I so desperately needed. Instead, I said nothing, trapped in the blue intensity of his gaze like an insect in amber. Anton pushed away from the desk and walked to the windows, hands clasped behind his back as he surveyed his kingdom below. You have no experience in high-end establishments. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. No, but I'm a fast learner, and I work hard. I don't doubt it. He turned back to face me, his expression unreadable. There's something haunted about you, Eleanor. You're running from something, or someone. My blood turned to ice. I don't know what you... Please. He held up a hand. I'm not asking for your story. We all have pasts we'd rather leave behind. What matters to me is whether you can do the job, and whether you can be trusted. The abrupt shift to business steadied me. This, at least, I could handle. I can do both. Anton studied me for another long moment, then nodded once. You start tomorrow, 8 p.m. sharp. Vivian will show you out and give you the employee handbook. Read it carefully. Just like that, I had the job. No questions about my employment history. No checking of references that would lead back to my old life, to Ryan. Relief crashed over me, nearly buckling my knees. Thank you, I said, rising on unsteady legs. You won't regret it. His smile was razor thin. I rarely regret my decisions, Eleanor. As if summoned by thought alone, Vivian appeared at the door. I turned to follow her, but Anton's voice stopped me. One last thing. His tone made me turn back slowly, dread pooling in my stomach. The bruise beneath your makeup, it's healing nicely. Make sure there are no more. My hand flew to my cheek, horror washing through me. Good night, Eleanor. His tone made it clear the conversation was over. Welcome to Vertigo. I stumbled after Vivian, my mind racing. How had he seen through my carefully applied concealer? What did he know about me? And why did I feel like I'd just made a deal with a devil I didn't understand? The rain had returned by the time I stepped back onto the street, heavier now, washing away the city grime in torrents. I let it soak me, too numb to open my umbrella. I had the job. I could stay in Chicago, hidden in plain sight. I could start rebuilding. I was so lost in thought that I didn't notice the black SUV idling across the street, its tinted windows reflecting the neon lights of the city. I didn't see the driver watching me through the rain, or the way his hand moved to his ear, speaking quietly into a hidden microphone. I didn't know that by accepting this job, I'd stepped from one cage into another, one lined with velvet rather than barbed wire, but a cage nonetheless. All I knew was that something about Anton Sokolov terrified me in a way Ryan never had, because while Ryan's cruelty had been chaotic and emotional, Anton's felt calculated, precise, the kind of man who never lost control because he never had to. And somehow, inexplicably, that made me feel safer than I had in months. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed in my narrow bed, haunted by ice-blue eyes that seemed to strip away my carefully constructed defenses. By morning, exhaustion had settled into my bones like an old friend, but beneath it thrummed an unfamiliar energy, anticipation, perhaps, or fear, disguised as excitement. The employee handbook sat on my rickety kitchen table, its sleek black cover emblazoned with the silver Vertigo logo. I'd read it cover to cover twice already, memorizing the dress code, all black, minimal jewelry, makeup elegant but understated. The house rules. Never sit with customers unless invited, never accept drinks while on duty, never discuss what happens inside Vertigo once you leave, and the hierarchy, bartenders at the top, followed by servers, then barbacks and support staff. I spent the day in a haze of preparation, washing my hair until it gleamed, painting my nails a deep burgundy that would pass as black in dim lighting, practicing how to walk in the only decent heels I owned. Anything to keep my mind from wandering to Anton Sokolov and the way his presence had filled that office, making it difficult to breathe. Mia called around noon, her voice crackling with static and something that sounded like relief. "You got it. I knew you would," she said, the background noise suggesting she was at her hospital job. "Anton never makes snap decisions, but I told him you were perfect." "What exactly did you tell him about me, Mia?" I kept my tone light, casual, though my knuckles whitened around the phone. A pause. "Just that you needed a break, that you're reliable. Nothing personal." The hesitation told me everything. "You told him about Ryan?" "Not details," she said quickly. "Just that you were leaving a bad situation. Anton. He has resources, Ellie. If your ex ever showed up, Anton could make sure he regretted it." Ice slid down my spine. What kind of bar owner has resources for that sort of thing? Another pause, longer this time. "Anton's family has been in Chicago for generations. They have connections." She lowered her voice. "Listen, just be professional and do your job. Anton's fair to people who are loyal. That's all you need to know." The call ended before I could press further, leaving me with more questions than answers. What had I walked into? What did connections mean in this context? The word carried ominous undertones, conjuring images of smoke-filled rooms and blood-stained concrete. By the time I arrived at Vertigo that evening, 30 minutes early, anxiety making punctuality imperative, my nerves were strung tight as piano wire. The same bouncer from yesterday nodded in recognition, directing me to a different side entrance marked "Staff Only." Inside, the employee area was a stark contrast to the opulent club beyond. Utilitarian lockers lined one wall, a small break room with coffee machine and refrigerator occupied the corner, and a long mirror stretched above a counter cluttered with hair products and makeup. Several women were already there, transforming themselves from ordinary to extraordinary with practiced efficiency. Vivian materialized beside me, clipboard in hand. "Locker 17 is yours. Uniform is in there. You have 15 minutes to change and report to the main bar for training." The uniform was simple, but elegant. A fitted black button-up shirt with the Vertigo logo embroidered in silver thread over the heart, and slim black pants that hugged my curves more flatteringly than I expected. I changed quickly, hyper-aware of the other women watching me with thinly veiled curiosity. A tall blonde with sharp cheekbones and sharper eyes approached as I struggled with the unfamiliar tie that completed the ensemble. "Here." She batted my hands away, her fingers deftly creating a perfect knot. "You're Anton's new project." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "I'm just a new hire, Ellie." Her laugh was musical but held no warmth. "Anton doesn't personally interview bar staff, sweetheart. He has managers for that." She stepped back, assessing me with narrowed eyes. "I'm Natasha, head bartender. You'll be shadowing me tonight." The main bar was a masterpiece of dark wood and gleaming chrome. A horseshoe-shaped island in a sea of plush velvet booths and low tables. The back wall was an illuminated display of spirits, many bottles I didn't recognize, arranged with artistic precision. Natasha moved behind the bar with the confidence of someone in her natural habitat, immediately checking inventory and prep work with a critical eye. "Watch everything I do," she instructed, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Don't touch anything unless I tell you to. Don't speak to customers unless spoken to, and if Anton or any of his associates come in, you let me handle them. Understood?" I nodded, wondering again what sort of place I'd found myself in. What sort of man inspired such deference in a woman who clearly feared very little? The club filled quickly once doors opened. The clientele a mix of beautiful people in designer clothes, older men with young arm candy, and the occasional group that didn't quite fit the luxury aesthetic, but moved with the confidence of those who belonged anyway. I observed Natasha as instructed, marveling at the speed and precision with which she crafted complex cocktails while maintaining effortless conversation with customers. "Remember faces," she murmured during a brief lull, not looking up from the mint she was muddling. "Anton values staff who can greet regulars by name and remember their usual orders." I was memorizing the layout of the bar, the location of each bottle and tool, when the atmosphere shifted. It was subtle but unmistakable. Conversations quieting, postures straightening, eyes darting toward the VIP section in the corner. Without looking up, Natasha reached for a specific bottle of vodka, one kept separate from the others, its Cyrillic label unreadable to me. "He's here," she said under her breath. "Stay here, I'll be right back." I watched her move out from behind the bar, the crowd parting for her like the Red Sea as she carried a tray with the vodka bottle and a single crystal glass toward the VIP area. I couldn't see who sat in the shadowed booth, but I felt the weight of attention like a physical thing, the same crawling sensation between my shoulder blades that I'd felt in Anton's office. He was watching me. I knew it, with the same instinctive certainty prey feels when a predator's gaze locks on. Natasha returned, her expression carefully neutral. "Anton wants you to bring his next drink. In an hour, he says you'll know when." My mouth went dry. "What does he drink?" "You saw the bottle. 2 fingers neat, no ice." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What did you do to catch his attention like this?" "Nothing," I said truthfully. "I don't know why he's interested in me." Natasha studied me for a moment longer before turning away with a shrug that clearly said your funeral. The next hour passed in a blur of observation and minor tasks, fetching ice, slicing garnishes, memorizing the house specialty cocktails that adorned the leather-bound menu. At precisely the 1-hour mark, I felt it again, that prickling awareness. I looked up involuntarily, my gaze drawn to the VIP section like a magnet to true north. Anton sat alone now, his security detail positioned discreetly nearby. His eyes found mine across the crowded room, and he raised his empty glass slightly, a silent summons. My hands trembled as I prepared his drink, painfully aware of Natasha's scrutiny and the weight of Anton's expectation. The bottle was heavier than I anticipated, the liquor catching the light like liquid platinum as it flowed into the crystal tumbler. The path to the VIP section felt miles long, each step carrying me further from safety and deeper into unknown territory. The music pulsed around me, bass thrumming through my veins in counterpoint to my racing heart. Security personnel, enormous men with earpieces and expressionless faces, watched my approach with cold calculation. Anton tracked my progress with those unnervingly blue eyes, his face revealing nothing. He sat alone in a curved booth that could easily seat 8, one arm stretched along the back cushion, the picture of relaxed authority. His suit tonight was charcoal gray, his shirt pristine white with no tie, the top buttons undone to reveal a glimpse of tanned skin and the glint of a platinum chain. Eleanor. My name in his mouth sounded different somehow. Weightier, more significant. How are you finding your first night? I set the glass before him with a steady hand that surprised even me. Educational. A smile flickered at the corner of his mouth. Sit, he said, gesturing to the space beside him. When I hesitated, his smile widened fractionally. It's not a request. I slid into the booth, careful to maintain space between us. Up close, I could smell his cologne. Something expensive and subtle, notes of cedar and spice with an underlying warmth that was purely him. The scent triggered something primal in my brain. A warning, perhaps, or something more complicated. Natasha is an excellent teacher, he said, lifting the glass I'd brought him, but she can be territorial. If she gives you trouble, let me know. I can handle difficult personalities, I said, thinking of Ryan's unpredictable moods, the eggshell dance I'd perfected to avoid triggering his temper. Something in my tone made Anton's eyes sharpen. Yes, I imagine you can. He took a sip of his vodka, those blue eyes never leaving mine. Tell me something true about yourself, Eleanor. Not the story you've crafted for others, but something real. The request caught me off guard. I'm not sure what you mean. Yes, you do. His voice was soft but implacable. One truth freely given, considerate payment for the opportunity I've provided. I should have invented something harmless. A childhood memory, a trivial preference, anything but the raw truth that spilled from my lips. I'm terrified all the time, I admitted, the words barely audible over the music. Even before him. I've always been waiting for something awful to happen, and when it finally did, it was almost a relief, like the monster under the bed finally showed itself. Anton's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted, darkened. And now you wonder if you've simply exchanged one monster for another. It wasn't a question, so I didn't answer. I couldn't. Your monster, he said after a moment, swirling the clear liquid in his glass. Does he have a name? My throat closed around Ryan's name, panic fluttering in my chest like a trapped bird. Anton watched the emotions play across my face with clinical interest. You don't need to tell me. Names have power, and you're not ready to give him up just yet. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a near whisper. But when you are, when you're ready to be truly free of him, you'll tell me. And then I'll make sure he never haunts you again. The promise sent a shiver through me. Fear and something else. Something I wasn't ready to examine. Is that what you do? Make people disappear? He laughed then, a genuine sound that transformed his face, making him appear younger, almost approachable. I'm a businessman, Eleanor. I provide services and products that people want. He gestured toward the club around us. This is one of my more legitimate enterprises. The implication hung in the air between us. I should have been frightened. I should have stood up and walked out, left Chicago entirely. Instead, I found myself asking, why me? Why offer me a job when you clearly know nothing about me? Anton studied me for a long moment. Perhaps I recognized something in you, a survivor's instinct. Or perhaps I simply wanted to see if you'd take it, if you'd step willingly into the unknown, rather than remain in a familiar hell. And which did I choose? My voice emerged steadier than I felt. His smile was slow, predatory. That remains to be seen. He glanced over my shoulder, a subtle signal that sent one of his security men moving toward us. You should return to the bar. Natasha will be wondering what's keeping you. I slid out of the booth, suddenly desperate for space, for air that wasn't saturated with his presence. But his voice stopped me before I could escape. One more thing, Eleanor. Those blue eyes locked on mine, all traces of warmth vanishing. The rules in the handbook about discretion. Take them very, very seriously. What happens in Vertigo stays in Vertigo. What happens in my presence stays between us. Break that trust, and our arrangement ends, unpleasantly. The threat was clear, wrapped in velvet though it was. I nodded once, unable to find my voice, and turned to leave. And Eleanor? The sound of my name pulled me back around. That color suits you. The hair. But I find myself wondering what you look like as a blonde. Ice crystallized in my veins. He knew. Somehow, he knew what I'd looked like before. The knowledge felt like hands around my throat, squeezing. "Good night, Mr. Sokolov." I retreated, feeling his eyes on me until I disappeared into the crowd. Back at the bar, Natasha's curiosity was palpable, but she asked no questions. The rest of the night passed in a blur of orders and movements, my body operating on autopilot while my mind raced. By closing time, my feet ached and my head pounded. But the envelope Natasha handed me, containing my night's tips, made the discomfort worthwhile. "You survived," she said, something like respect flickering in her eyes. "Most don't make it past training when Anton takes a personal interest." I wasn't sure if that was meant as a warning or encouragement. Either way, I had no choice now but to continue. The money in that envelope represented freedom, or at least the beginnings of it. One step at a time away from Ryan, even if it meant stepping closer to Anton Sokolov and whatever dangerous world he inhabited. As I left through the staff exit, the same black SUV from the night before idled across the street. This time, I noticed it immediately, my senses heightened by exhaustion and adrenaline. The window lowered slightly as I watched, revealing nothing but shadow and the burning end of a cigarette. Then it rolled up again, and the vehicle pulled away, tires whispering against wet asphalt. I walked home through deserted streets, jumping at every sound, Anton's words echoing in my mind, a survivor's instinct. Is that what had led me here? Not escape, but some twisted form of self-preservation that recognized one predator as less dangerous than another? The thought followed me home, into my dreams, where blue eyes watched from the shadows and hands that should have felt threatening offered protection instead. 3 weeks at Vertigo had transformed my life in ways I hadn't anticipated. My studio apartment, once barren save for necessities, now boasted small luxuries: a plush throw for the threadbare couch, decent kitchen knives, a coffee maker that didn't sound like it was dying each morning. The tips were better than good. They were life-changing. More than the money, though, was the routine. The stability I hadn't realized I craved after months of looking over my shoulder. I'd settled into a rhythm: sleep until noon, errands in the early afternoon, work from 8 until the club closed at 3, then the quiet walk home through streets that no longer seemed as threatening. Most nights, Anton made an appearance at the club, though he rarely stayed long. Sometimes he would summon me to his table for a brief conversation. Other times, he'd simply watch from a distance, those ice-blue eyes tracking my movements as I worked. I told myself his interest was professional, a boss monitoring a new employee, but the weight of his gaze carried something more proprietary, something that should have sent me running but instead ignited a warmth I'd thought Ryan had extinguished permanently. Tonight, however, was different. For one, Anton hadn't appeared by his usual hour. For another, Natasha was on edge, checking her phone every few minutes, snapping at junior staff for minor infractions. "Is everything okay?" I asked during a lull, restocking the garnish tray while Natasha aggressively polished already gleaming glassware. She glanced around before leaning closer. "Anniversary of Mikhail Sokolov's death. Anton's father," she added at my blank look. "He doesn't come in on this date, usually holes up at the estate with family." I absorbed this information, this tiny glimpse into Anton's personal life. "How did his father die?" Natasha's eyes widened fractionally. "You don't know anything about the Sokolovs, do you?" She shook her head before I could respond. "Car bomb, 10 years ago. Made Anton head of the family business at 23, changed him." The casual mention of a car bomb should have shocked me more than it did. Instead, pieces began fitting together. Anton's security detail, the deference bordering on fear he inspired, the legitimate business comment. "He's not just a nightclub owner, is he?" My voice emerged as barely a whisper. Natasha's laugh held no humor. "Nightclubs, restaurants, construction companies, import-export businesses, real estate, the Sokolov portfolio is diverse." Her tone made it clear there were other, less discussable income streams. "Anton took what his father built and expanded it tenfold. He's untouchable in this city." Before I could ask more, The crowd parted like the Red Sea, conversations hushing as Anton himself materialized at the bar. He wore black on black, suit, shirt, tie, his face paler than usual, shadows beneath his eyes suggesting sleepless nights. Behind him loomed his usual security detail, their expressions grimmer than normal. "Natasha," he greeted, his voice rougher than I'd ever heard it. "A bottle of the reserve, my father's favorite." She nodded, retrieving a dusty bottle from beneath the bar, its label faded with age. Without being asked, I gathered a tray and 2 crystal glasses, earning a raised eyebrow from Anton. "For you and your guest," I explained, nodding toward a striking older woman who'd entered behind him. Her silver-streaked dark hair was pulled into a severe chignon, her black dress elegant but conservative. Even without the family resemblance, I would have recognized Anton's mother in the regal way she carried herself, the careful way Anton guided her to his usual booth. "Bring it yourself," he instructed, his hand brushing mine as he turned away, a fleeting contact that sent electricity skittering along my nerves. I followed at a respectful distance, allowing them time to settle before approaching with the tray. Up close, Mrs. Sokolov was even more intimidating, her face a feminine version of Anton's, those same penetrating blue eyes sweeping over me with calculating precision. "You must be Eleanor," she said, her accent thicker than her son's. "Anton has mentioned you." I nearly fumbled the bottle in surprise. Anton had talked to his mother about me. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Sokolov." "Irina," she corrected, watching as I poured the amber liquid into their glasses. "My son says you make quite an impression." I risked a glance at Anton, finding his expression unreadable. "I'm just doing my job." "She's being modest," Anton said, his eyes never leaving my face. "Eleanor has a talent for adaptation." Something passed between mother and son, a silent communication I couldn't decipher. Irina lifted her glass in a silent toast, which Anton mirrored before they both drank. "Leave the bottle," Anton instructed as I made to retreat. "And bring another glass." My pulse jumped. "Sir?" "Join us," Irina clarified, gesturing to the empty space beside her son. "Just for a moment. It's a night for remembrance, and fresh faces make old grief more bearable." It wasn't a request I could refuse. I retrieved another glass and slid into the booth beside Anton, acutely aware of his proximity, the heat of him burning through the sleeve of my uniform where our arms nearly touched. Irina poured a measure into my glass, her movements precise despite the emotion evident in her eyes. "To Mikhail," she said, raising her glass once more. "To father," Anton echoed, his voice tight with controlled grief. I lifted my own glass, uncertain of the protocol but understanding the importance of the moment. The liquor burned a path down my throat, warming me from within. Expensive cognac, I realized, far smoother than anything I'd tasted before. "He would have liked you," Irina said abruptly, her gaze piercing through me. Mikhail had a fondness for those with fire in their eyes, those who had survived something. I swallowed hard, unsure how to respond to such an assessment from a woman who knew nothing about me. Or so I thought. "Eleanor is running from someone," Anton said, swirling the cognac in his glass. "A man who thought he owned her." Betrayal flashed hot in my chest. "I never told you that." "You didn't have to." His eyes met mine, challenging. "I had you investigated the night Mia recommended you." The cognac turned to acid in my stomach. "You had no right." "I had every right," he countered, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. "I need to know who enters my world, what baggage they bring with them." "Anton is protective of what he considers his," Irina interjected, her tone suggesting this was a familiar trait rather than a criticism. "I'm not his," I said, the words emerging sharper than intended. "I'm an employee." A cold smile curved Anton's mouth. "For now." The implications of those 2 words hung in the air between us, charged with meaning I wasn't prepared to examine. I moved to stand, suddenly desperate for space, but Anton's hand closed around my wrist. Not painfully, but with enough pressure to communicate his wish for me to remain. "My son is not always delicate in his approach," Irina said, watching our interaction with shrewd eyes. "But his intentions are usually sound." She finished her drink and set the glass down with finality. "I will retire now. The day has been long enough." She slid gracefully from the booth, placing a hand on Anton's shoulder. "Don't frighten this one away, Anton. She has potential." With that cryptic assessment, she departed, one of Anton's security detail peeling away to escort her out. Anton's hand remained around my wrist, his thumb absently stroking the sensitive skin over my pulse point, in a gesture that felt unconsciously possessive. "You had me investigated." I kept my voice low, anger simmering beneath the surface. "You invaded my privacy." "I protected my interests," he corrected. "And yours, though you don't see it yet." "What exactly do you know about me?" He released my wrist, turning to face me more fully. "I know you're Eleanor Jean Hayes, 27, born in Cedar Rapids, community college dropout, worked as a waitress at 5 different establishments in 3 years. Lived with Ryan Daniels for 18 months in Milwaukee until you disappeared 3 months ago after an ER visit for accidental injuries." His eyes hardened. "I know he's been looking for you, that he's contacted your parents, your old friends, anyone who might know where you went." Each word was a blow, stripping away the illusion of safety I'd carefully constructed. "How? I have resources," Anton said simply. "Eyes and ears in many places. The moment your name crossed my desk, I made it my business to know everything about you." He leaned closer, his voice dropping further. "Including the restraining order you filed and then dropped, the police reports you made and then recanted, the pattern of control and escalation that nearly ended with you in a body bag." Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "Why? Why would you care about any of that?" Something flashed in his expression, something raw and personal that disappeared so quickly I might have imagined it. "Let's just say I recognized certain patterns." He refilled our glasses with meticulous precision. "Your Ryan Daniels is a particular type of predator, one I've encountered before." "He's not my Ryan," I said automatically, the possessive making my skin crawl. Anton's mouth quirked slightly. "No, he's not. Not anymore." He lifted his glass. "To new beginnings." The toast felt loaded with double meaning, but I raised my glass anyway, desperate to shift the conversation away from my past. To new beginnings. We drank in silence, the club pulsing around us, a bubble of stillness amid the chaos. When Anton spoke again, his voice had lost its edge, softened perhaps by the cognac and the weight of his own remembrance. "My father was murdered when I was 23, he said, eyes fixed on his glass. "A business rival. It was meant to be me in that car." He looked up, his gaze finding mine. "I've spent a decade ensuring no one ever gets that close to my family again. That no one takes what's mine." The possessive pronoun lingered between us, loaded with significance. I knew I should be frightened by the implications. The casual reference to murder, the hint of violence beneath his controlled exterior. Instead, I found myself leaning closer, drawn to the raw honesty in his voice. "Is that what you think Ryan would do if he found me? Kill me?" Anton's expression darkened. Men like that don't know how to let go. They'd rather destroy what they can't possess. His hand found mine on the table, engulfing it. "But he won't find you. Not here. Not while you're under my protection." "I never asked for your protection," I said, though I made no move to reclaim my hand. "You didn't have to." His thumb traced circles against my palm, the intimate gesture sending shivers up my arm. "It was given the moment you walked into my club. I should have pulled away. I should have thanked him politely and returned to work. I should have done anything but what I did, which was to turn my hand over, allowing our fingers to intertwine." "Why?" I whispered, the question encompassing everything. His interest, his protection, the way he looked at me like I was something precious rather than broken. Anton's free hand rose, fingers hovering near my cheek without quite touching. "Because I've been watching you rebuild yourself piece by piece. Because there's steel beneath the softness. Because—" He cut himself off, withdrawing slightly. "Because everyone deserves a second chance." It wasn't the whole truth, but I sensed it was all I would get tonight. I extricated my hand from his gently, gathering my professional demeanor around me like armor. "I should get back to work." He nodded, the mask of control sliding back into place. "Of course." I slipped from the booth, feeling his eyes on me as I made my way back to the bar. Natasha's questioning look went unanswered as I threw myself into work, desperate for the mindless routine of mixing drinks and making change to drown out the tumult of my thoughts. The night progressed, the club growing busier as midnight approached. I lost myself in the rhythm of the bar, in the mechanical precision of crafting cocktails. It wasn't until nearly 2 that I realized Anton had disappeared, his booth now occupied by a group of young professionals splashing around money and designer drugs with equal abandon. "He left about an hour ago," Natasha said, following my gaze. "Looked like he got a phone call, left in a hurry." I nodded, ignoring the inexplicable disappointment that settled in my chest. It was better this way, safer to maintain professional distance from a man who casually referenced murder and had me investigated without my knowledge or consent. By closing time, my feet ached, and my smile had long since ceased to reach my eyes. I counted my tips methodically, another excellent night, and changed back into street clothes, eager for the solitary walk home and the oblivion of sleep. The night air was unseasonably warm for late September, humidity clinging to my skin as I made my way through the familiar route home. My mind wandered, replaying the evening's revelations, so I didn't immediately register the sound of footsteps behind me, until they quickened to match my pace. Adrenaline flooded my system, Ryan's favorite tactics flashing through my mind. How he'd follow me home from work, waiting until I was alone to confront me, to remind me I was never truly free of him. I quickened my step, hand diving into my purse for the pepper spray I'd carried since fleeing Milwaukee. "Ellie." The voice, so achingly, terrifyingly familiar, froze me mid-stride. "Don't you dare run from me again." I turned slowly, fingers clenched around the pepper spray canister. And there he was, Ryan Daniels, exactly as I remembered, yet somehow diminished. His once intimidating frame appeared smaller, his handsome face haggard with what might have been grief or rage or both. "How did you find me?" My voice emerged steadier than I felt, adrenaline lending me temporary courage. He stepped closer, moonlight catching on the gold wedding band he still wore, the one that had left countless bruises on my skin when encased in his fist. "You think I wouldn't recognize you with dyed hair? That I wouldn't check every major city within driving distance?" His laugh was bitter. "You've always underestimated me, Ellie. It's why we had problems." "We had problems because you're abusive," I said, the words I'd never dared speak aloud during our relationship emerging now, sharp with truth. "Because you hurt me. Repeatedly." Rage flashed across his face, that familiar transformation that had once terrified me into submission. "I loved you. I gave you everything, and you repaid me by running away like a thief in the night. I left with nothing but the clothes on my back," I reminded him, backing away as he advanced. "Everything in that apartment was bought with your money, remember? You reminded me daily. And now look at you, tending bar, serving drinks to rich men. Is that really better than the life I gave you?" He was close enough now that I could smell the whiskey on his breath, see the whites of his bloodshot eyes. "Come home, Ellie. I've changed. I swear it. The familiar refrain, I've changed. I'm sorry. It'll be different, washed over me without effect. I'd heard it too many times after too many bruises to believe it now. "Go home, Ryan," I said, pepper spray now held visibly between us. "I'm not yours anymore. I never was." His face contorted, hand shooting out to grab my wrist before I could react, squeezing until the pepper spray clattered to the sidewalk. "You're mine until I say you're not," he growled, yanking me toward him. "No one else will ever want you like I do. Damaged goods that you are." I struggled against his grip, memories of similar confrontations paralyzing me with terror even as I fought. "Let me go." I aimed a kick at his shin, connecting solidly enough to make him curse and loosen his hold. It was enough. I wrenched free and ran, not toward my apartment. I couldn't lead him there, but back toward Vertigo, toward people and lights and safety. I'd made it perhaps half a block when he caught me, one hand fisting in my hair, the other clamping over my mouth to stifle my scream. "Always running," he hissed against my ear, dragging me toward the shadows of an alley. "Always fighting what you know is inevitable." I bit down on his hand, hard enough to taste copper, and his pained yelp was followed by a backhand that sent me staggering against the alley wall, ears ringing. Before I could recover, He was on me again, pinning me with his body weight, one hand around my throat. "I just wanted to talk," he said, his voice a parody of reason, even as his fingers tightened. "Why do you always make me hurt you?" Black spots danced at the edges of my vision, the pressure on my windpipe making each breath a struggle. This was it, I realized with strange clarity. This was how I died, in a dirty alley at the hands of a man who claimed to love me. Then, abruptly, the pressure vanished. Ryan was ripped away with such force that he stumbled backward several steps before landing hard on the pavement. I slumped against the wall, gasping for air, vision clearing just in time to see Anton Sokolov step between us, his back to me, facing Ryan with coiled stillness that promised violence. "I believe the lady asked you to let her go," Anton said, his accented voice colder than I'd ever heard it. Ryan scrambled to his feet, bewilderment giving way to anger as he assessed the newcomer. "This doesn't concern you. This is between me and my fiancé." I managed, my voice raw. "Ex-fiancé." Anton didn't turn, didn't acknowledge my correction. He simply stood there, a dark sentinel between me and danger. "I'm giving you one opportunity to walk away," he told Ryan, each word precisely enunciated. "Take it." Ryan laughed incredulously. "Or what? You'll call the cops?" "Go ahead." "I have a right to speak to her. The police aren't my preferred method of conflict resolution," Anton said. So quietly I barely heard him. He made a subtle gesture with one hand, and suddenly the alley entrance filled with shadows. The same security personnel who followed him at the club, now arranged in a semicircle that effectively blocked any escape route. Ryan's bravado faltered, reality finally penetrating his alcohol-fueled rage. "Who the fuck are you?" Anton stepped closer to him, moving with that same fluid grace that had first caught my attention. "I'm the man who's allowing you to leave here with all your limbs intact, provided you do so immediately and never attempt to contact Eleanor again." Something in his tone, the casual certainty perhaps, or the specific threat, finally penetrated Ryan's anger. He glanced from Anton to the men blocking the alley, then to me, his expression hardening into something ugly. "This is who you left me for? Some foreign gangster?" He spat on the ground near Anton's immaculate shoes. "You'll regret this, Ellie. Both of you. The only one with regrets will be you if I ever see your face again," Anton replied, stepping aside to clear a path to the alley entrance. "Now go." Ryan hesitated, clearly weighing his options, before shouldering past Anton with as much dignity as he could muster. He paused beside me, leaning close enough that I flinched away. "This isn't over," he whispered, before continuing past the line of security men and disappearing into the night. Only when his footsteps had faded did Anton turn to me, his composed expression cracking to reveal genuine concern. "Are you hurt?" The simple question, asked without accusation or impatience, broke something inside me. Tears I'd held at bay for months spilled over, my legs buckling as reaction set in. Anton caught me before I hit the ground, gathering me against his chest with surprising gentleness. "I've got you," he murmured, one hand cradling the back of my head, the other wrapped securely around my waist. "You're safe now." I should have questioned why he was there, how he'd known I needed help. I should have been frightened by the casual way he'd threatened Ryan, the implicit violence in his words. Instead, I clung to him, face buried against his shoulder, breathing in the now familiar scent of his cologne as sobs racked my body. "Take her to the penthouse," I heard him instruct someone over my head. "I'll follow shortly." "No," I managed, pulling back enough to see his face. "My apartment is no longer safe," he finished firmly. "He followed you from Vertigo, which means he knows where you work. It won't take him long to discover where you live." His thumb brushed away a tear from my cheek. "The penthouse has security. You'll be protected there." I wanted to argue, to insist on my independence, but exhaustion and fear overwhelmed my pride. I nodded weakly, allowing Anton to guide me toward a familiar black SUV idling at the curb. "I need to ensure our friend understands the consequences of tonight's actions," Anton said as he helped me into the vehicle. "Dmitri will take you to the penthouse. I won't be long." "What are you going to do?" I asked, sudden alarm piercing through my shock. Anton's smile was cold and without humor. Nothing permanent. Just a conversation to reinforce tonight's lesson. I should have protested. Should have insisted he let Ryan go. Let the police handle it. Instead, I found myself nodding. A dark satisfaction unfurling in my chest at the thought of Ryan experiencing even a fraction of the fear he'd inflicted on me. "Be careful," I said instead, reaching for his hand. "He's dangerous when he's cornered." Anton's expression softened slightly, his fingers squeezing mine. "So am I." He stepped back, closing the SUV door with finality. "Go, rest. I'll join you soon." As the vehicle pulled away, I caught a glimpse of Anton in the side mirror, still standing in the street, phone already at his ear as he issued instructions to someone on the other end. In that moment, framed by streetlights and shadow, he looked every inch what Ryan had called him, a gangster, a man of violence and power, and yet, all I felt was safe for the first time in months. The Sokolov penthouse occupied the top floor of a sleek high-rise overlooking the river, the kind of building with a uniformed doorman and a private elevator that required a keycard to access. Dmitri, Anton's driver and apparent head of security, escorted me up with silent efficiency, his broad shoulders and vigilant eyes a reassuring presence after the night's events. The apartment itself was a study in understated luxury, soaring ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the glittering cityscape, furnishings that whispered of wealth rather than shouting it. Modern art adorned the walls, sculptures of twisted metal and glass catching the low light. It was beautiful and impersonal, more like a high-end hotel suite than a home. "Mr. Sokolov said you should make yourself comfortable," Dmitri said, gesturing toward a hallway. "Guest room is first door on the left. There should be everything you need." "Thank you," I managed, my voice still raw from Ryan's assault. "Do you know when he'll be back?" Dimitri's expression revealed nothing. "When he's finished. The kitchen is stocked if you're hungry. Security is downstairs and monitoring all entrances." He paused at the door. "No one gets in without authorization. You're safe here." With that, he departed, leaving me alone in Anton's domain. I stood frozen for several minutes, reality washing over me in nauseating waves. Ryan had found me. He'd been watching me, following me. If Anton hadn't appeared when he did... I forced the thought away, moving on unsteady legs toward the guest room. Like the rest of the penthouse, it was elegant and impersonal. King-sized bed with crisp white linens, abstract painting in muted blues above the headboard, attached bathroom gleaming with marble and chrome. A small duffel bag sat on a bench at the foot of the bed, and inside I found toiletries, a silk pajama set, and a soft t-shirt and sweatpants that would obviously swallow my frame. Anton's clothes, I realized with a strange flutter in my chest. I showered mechanically, water as hot as I could stand it, scrubbing my skin until it flushed pink. The bruises were already forming, fingerprints around my throat, a darkening patch on my cheek where Ryan's backhand had connected. I dried off and pulled on the t-shirt, the fabric carrying that same subtle cologne that clung to Anton, the one that had become synonymous with safety in my mind. Sleep was out of the question. I wandered back to the main living area, drawn to the panoramic view of the city. Chicago sprawled below me, a tapestry of lights and shadows, beautiful from this distance. Somewhere down there, Anton was confronting Ryan. The thought should have troubled me more than it did. I wasn't sure how much time had passed when I heard the elevator doors slide open. I turned from the window to find Anton standing in the entryway, his suit jacket removed, shirt sleeves rolled to expose strong forearms. His knuckles were raw, a small cut above one eyebrow trickling blood he hadn't bothered to wipe away. "You're hurt," I said stupidly, moving toward him without conscious thought. His mouth quirked in a humorless smile. "Superficial. Your former fiancé has a surprisingly decent right hook." A chill ran through me at the implication. "What did you do to him?" Anton crossed to a sideboard and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid, his movements precise despite what must have been significant pain in his hands. "Nothing he didn't deserve, nothing permanent." He offered me one of the glasses, and I took it automatically, our fingers brushing in the exchange. "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting tonight." His eyes traveled to my throat, darkening at the sight of the bruises forming there. You should have told me he was so violent. I didn't know you, I said simply, taking a sip of what turned out to be excellent whiskey. And it's not exactly first date conversation material. Not a date, just an interview for a job I didn't need, Anton countered, moving to stand beside me at the window. You must have wondered why I hired someone with no high-end bar experience for my most exclusive club. I had wondered, of course, but had been too grateful for the opportunity to question it too deeply. Mia said you were doing her a favor. Mia's husband works for me, Anton said, swirling the whiskey in his glass. When she mentioned a friend in trouble, running from an abusive ex, I saw an opportunity to help someone who needed it. I've made it something of a personal mission over the years. I studied his profile, sharp and aristocratic in the low light. Why? Anton was silent for so long I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, stripped of its usual commanding tone. My sister, Katya, she was 19 when she met him. Charming, successful businessman. By the time we realized what was happening behind closed doors, she was too afraid to leave, too convinced she deserved it. His knuckles whitened around his glass. She finally gathered the courage to run after he put her in the hospital. He found her 3 days later. The police called it a murder-suicide. Horror washed through me, followed immediately by understanding. That's why you recognized the patterns. I've become something of an expert, he said with bitter self-mockery. I recognize the signs, the hypervigilance, the way you flinch at sudden movements, how you always position yourself near exits. He turned to face me fully. I couldn't save Katya, but I've helped others since. Set them up with new identities, jobs, places to live where they can't be found. Is that what you're doing with me, adding me to your collection of rescued women? Anton's eyes narrowed slightly. You're not a collectible, Eleanor. You're... He stopped, seeming to reconsider his words. You remind me of her. Not physically, but in spirit. She had the same quiet strength beneath the fear. The same fire. I don't feel very strong right now, I admitted, one hand rising unconsciously to touch the bruises on my throat. Anton set his glass down and stepped closer, his fingers replacing mine, ghosting over the marks with a gentleness that belied the violence those same hands had likely inflicted earlier tonight. Strength isn't about not being afraid, he said softly. It's about continuing despite the fear. Our eyes met, and something shifted in the air between us, the careful distance we'd maintained dissolving in the wake of shared vulnerability. His hand moved from my throat to my face, thumb brushing my cheek in a tentative caress. I want to kiss you, he said, the words stark with honesty. But I won't. Not tonight. Not when you're still processing everything that's happened. The admission, and the restraint it revealed, touched me more deeply than I expected. This man, who clearly took what he wanted in every other aspect of his life, was giving me choice, control. Thank you, I whispered, letting my own hand rise to cover his where it rested against my cheek, for saving me, for bringing me here, for not kissing me. A smile ghosted across his mouth. Don't thank me for basic human decency. In my experience, decency isn't all that common. I stepped back, suddenly overwhelmed by his proximity, by the weight of the night's events. I should try to sleep. Anton nodded, retrieving his whiskey glass. Of course. We'll talk more in the morning. Make arrangements for your security going forward. You think he'll come back? It wasn't a question. Men like that don't simply disappear, Anton said, his expression hardening. But next time, you'll be prepared. Protected. I wanted to argue, to insist I could protect myself, but the memory of Ryan's hand around my throat was too fresh, the terror too real. Instead, I simply nodded. Good night, Anton. Sleep well, Eleanor, he replied softly, watching as I retreated toward the guest room. Despite my certainty that rest would elude me, I fell asleep almost instantly, wrapped in sheets that smelled faintly of lavender and safety, the distant sounds of the city forming a lullaby. I dreamed of blue eyes and gentle hands, of being held rather than restrained, of a voice that promised protection without demanding submission in return. Morning came with disorientation, the unfamiliar softness of the mattress, the quality of light streaming through windows larger than my entire apartment bathroom. For a moment, I couldn't recall how I'd gotten here, why I wasn't in my own bed. Then memory returned in a rush. Ryan's ambush, Anton's intervention, the revelation of his sister's fate. I sat up slowly, wincing at the stiffness in my body, the tender bruises around my throat. The digital clock on the nightstand read 10:37 a.m., hours later than I typically woke. A soft knock at the door jolted me fully awake. "Eleanor? Are you awake?" Anton's voice, controlled and careful. I pulled the sheets higher instinctively, though the oversized t-shirt covered me completely. "Yes. Come in." He entered with a tray balanced in one hand, steam rising from a carafe of what smelled like fresh coffee. He'd changed since last night, dark jeans and a simple black sweater that somehow looked just as elegant as his tailored suits. The cut above his eyebrow had been cleaned, but not bandaged, his knuckles now properly wrapped. "I thought you might be hungry," he said, setting the tray on the bedside table. "I'm not much of a cook, but I can manage coffee and toast." The casual domesticity of the gesture caught me off guard. This was Anton Sokolov, nightclub owner, businessman, and, if I was being honest with myself, almost certainly involved in organized crime, bringing me breakfast in bed like we were... What? What exactly was happening between us? "Thank you," I said, accepting the cup of coffee he offered. "You didn't have to do this," he shrugged, perching on the edge of the bed at a respectful distance. "I wanted to. Besides, we need to talk, and I found discussions go better with caffeine." I sipped the coffee, perfect, strong, and sweet, exactly as I preferred it. Had he noticed how I took it during our conversations at Vertigo, or was it simply a lucky guess? "About last night," he began, his tone shifting to something more businesslike. "I've arranged for your things to be collected from your apartment and brought here. Dmitri and 2 of my men are handling it now." "What?" I nearly choked on my coffee. "I can't stay here. I have an apartment. A lease." "A lease in the name of Eleanor Hayes," Anton interrupted gently. "A name Ryan Daniels knows has been searching for. It's not safe for you there anymore." The reality of the situation sank in slowly. My carefully constructed new life, the independence I'd fought for, the safety I'd thought I'd found, had been shattered the moment Ryan spotted me. I was back to square one, running, hiding. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, hating the tremor in my voice. "I can't start over again. I don't have the resources. You have me," Anton said simply, as if offering support to virtual strangers was something he did every day. Perhaps it was. "You can stay here until we find you something more suitable. Or..." He hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. I raised an eyebrow, encouraging him to continue. "Or, you could stay here indefinitely," he finished. "The penthouse has 3 bedrooms. You'd have your privacy, your independence, and security." I stared at him, trying to process the offer. "You want me to move in with you? I want you to be safe," he corrected. "And this is the safest place I can offer. Ryan Daniels would never get past the lobby, let alone to this floor." "Why?" I asked, the question encompassing everything. His help, his protection, the indefinable tension between us. "What do you want from me in return?" Anton's eyes darkened slightly. "Is it so hard to believe I might simply want to help?" "Yes," I said honestly. "In my experience, nothing comes without strings," he nodded, accepting the assessment without offense. "Fair enough. I told you about Katya, about how I couldn't save her. That's part of it. Atonement, perhaps. But there's more." His gaze held mine, unflinching. "I'm drawn to you, Eleanor, in a way I haven't been drawn to anyone in a very long time. I want to see who you become when you're not looking over your shoulder, when you're not running or hiding. I want..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I want the opportunity to know that woman." The admission hung between us, brutally honest and strangely vulnerable, coming from a man who projected such control and power. I should have been wary. This had all the hallmarks of another unhealthy dynamic, another man trying to position himself as savior and protector. And yet, something felt different. Anton had opportunities to exert control over me last night, and hadn't taken them. He'd brought me to safety, and then given me space. He'd been honest about his interest without making demands. "I don't know if I can be what you want," I said finally, setting down my coffee cup with hands that trembled slightly. "I'm still broken. I don't know if I can trust anyone, let alone a man I barely know who clearly lives a life I don't fully understand." "I'm not asking for promises," Anton said, rising from the bed. "Just time. Stay. Heal. Get to know me. Let me get to know you. If at any point you want to leave, I'll help you set up somewhere else, somewhere safe." He moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. "The choice is yours, Eleanor. It will always be yours." With that, he left, closing the door softly behind him, leaving me with cooling coffee and a decision that felt monumental in its implications. I spent the morning exploring the penthouse while Anton worked in his home office, phone calls in rapid-fire Russian occasionally drifting down the hallway. The place was even larger than I'd realized last night. 3 bedrooms, each with its own bathroom, a chef's kitchen I suspected rarely saw use, a formal dining room, and a study lined with books in multiple languages. The terrace wrapped around 2 sides of the building, offering views that made my heart stop with their beauty. It was late afternoon when Dmitri returned with several boxes and suitcases. My entire life, packed up and transported while I sipped expensive coffee and contemplated my future from a luxury penthouse. The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on me. "Where would you like these, Miss Hayes?" Dmitri asked, his stoic expression betraying nothing of what he thought about his boss bringing home a bartender with a violent ex. "The guest room is fine," I said, then hesitated. "Actually, has Anton, Mr. Sokolov, said where he wants me to stay? If I stay?" Something like approval flickered in Dmitri's eyes. "He said the choice of rooms was yours, but he had the blue room prepared." He nodded toward the hall leading to the 3rd bedroom, the one I hadn't yet explored. The blue room, as Dmitri called it, was breathtaking. Walls painted a soft azure, furnishings in complementary shades of cream and silver, a private balcony overlooking the river. Unlike the impersonal guest room I'd occupied last night, this space felt designed for comfort, for living rather than just staying. "This was Katya's room," Anton's voice came from behind me. "When she needed somewhere to go, she stayed here." I turned to find him leaning against the doorframe, watching my reaction with guarded eyes. "It's beautiful," I said softly, "but I don't want to disturb her space." "It's been empty for 7 years," he replied, stepping into the room. "She would have liked you, I think. She would want her room used by someone who needed it as she once did." The significance of the gesture wasn't lost on me. He was offering not just a place to stay, but a connection to someone he'd loved and lost, someone whose fate he was trying to prevent me from sharing. "If I stay," I began carefully, "there would need to be boundaries. I won't be kept or controlled." Anton's expression remained neutral, but something like respect flickered in his eyes. "Name your terms." "I keep working at Vertigo," I said, the first condition coming easily. "I pay rent, a fair market rate for a room in this area." "The building is owned by Sokolov Holdings," he countered. "Technically, you'd be renting from my company, not from me personally. Would that be acceptable?" I nodded slowly. "I maintain my own finances, my own schedule. I come and go as I please." "With security," he interjected. "At least until we're certain Ryan is no longer a threat. Non-negotiable." It was reasonable, if unwelcome. "Fine, but they stay outside. They don't follow me into buildings or monitor who I spend time with." Anton considered this for a moment before nodding. "Agreed, with one exception. They accompany you to and from Vertigo until we have a more permanent solution to the Ryan problem." The phrasing sent a chill through me. "What do you mean, permanent solution?" His expression hardened. "I told you, men like that don't simply disappear. He'll try again. Next time, we'll be ready." "I don't want him hurt," I said quickly, surprising myself with the surge of protectiveness for a man who'd nearly killed me less than 24 hours ago. "Whatever happened between us, whatever he did, I don't want blood on my hands." Anton studied me for a long moment, something like wonderment crossing his features. "Still defending him, even now?" "Not defending," I corrected, moving to the window to escape the intensity of his gaze. "I just I don't want to be responsible for violence. There's been enough of that already. I heard him approach, felt his presence behind me, close but not touching, respecting the invisible barrier I'd erected. I promise you this, he said, his voice low and solemn. Whatever happens with Ryan Daniels, it will be his choices that determine his fate, not yours. You bear no responsibility for the consequences of his actions. It wasn't exactly the reassurance I'd been seeking, but I recognized it was the most he would offer. I turned to face him, finding him closer than I'd expected, those blue eyes searching mine. One last condition, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. No expectations. No pressure. Whatever this is between us, I gestured vaguely between our bodies, indicating the unnamed tension that had hummed since our first meeting. It develops naturally or not at all. A slow smile spread across his face, genuine and warm, in a way that transformed his features from merely handsome to devastating. I believe in fate, Eleanor. What's meant to happen between us will happen in its own time. He extended his hand formally. Do we have an agreement? I placed my hand in his much larger one, feeling calluses I wouldn't have expected on a man who wore bespoke suits and owned luxury penthouses. Agreement. His fingers closed around mine, warm and solid. Welcome home, then. Home. The word echoed strangely in my chest, hopeful and terrifying in equal measure. I'd thought I'd found home in my tiny apartment, in my independence. Now I was entering into an arrangement that felt precarious in its complexity, with a man whose world operated by rules I didn't understand. And yet, as Anton released my hand and moved away, giving me space to absorb my decision, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before Ryan entered my life. The quiet certainty that I was exactly where I needed to be. Over the next 2 weeks, we settled into a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. Anton was often gone during the day. Legitimate business meetings, he claimed, though I had my suspicions about some of the less formal gatherings that took place at Vertigo after hours. I continued working at the club, now accompanied by a rotating security detail that maintained a discreet distance, but was always watchful. Natasha had raised an eyebrow the first night I arrived with one of Anton's men, but asked no questions. The staff treated me differently now, with a deference that made me uncomfortable until Vivian explained it in her characteristically blunt fashion. You live under his protection now, she said, as we restocked the bar before opening. That makes you untouchable. I'm still just a bartender, I protested. Vivian's laugh was sharp. Honey, you were never just anything from the moment Anton took an interest in you. The sooner you accept that, the easier your life will be. I wasn't sure I wanted to accept it. The implications that I was somehow Anton's, that I belonged to him rather than with him. And yet, I couldn't deny the safety I felt in his presence, the way conversation flowed easily between us over late-night meals when I returned from Vertigo, the comfort of knowing he was just down the hall as I fell asleep in Katya's blue room. Nothing physical had happened between us beyond the occasional brush of hands or lingering glance. True to his word, Anton seemed content to let whatever was developing between us unfold at its own pace. It was a courtesy Ryan had never extended. His pursuit had been relentless from our first meeting, overwhelming in its intensity until I mistook persistence for passion. There had been no sign of Ryan since that night in the alley. Anton assured me his men were keeping tabs on my ex, that he remained in Chicago, but had made no further attempts to approach me. The bruises on my throat had faded to yellow, then disappeared entirely, but the memory of his hands there remained. Phantom pressure that sometimes woke me gasping in the night. On those nights, I would often find Anton in the living room, working at his laptop or reading, as if he somehow sensed my distress. He never mentioned my nightmares, simply offered me tea or stronger spirits, and sat with me in companionable silence until the panic subsided. It was on one such night, nearly 3 weeks after moving into the penthouse, that something shifted between us. I'd woken from a particularly vivid dream, Ryan's hands around my throat, transforming into a noose, tightening as he watched impassively. I stumbled to the kitchen for water, finding Anton at the dining table, papers spread before him, reading glasses perched on his nose in a surprisingly humanizing detail. He looked up at my entrance, immediately setting aside his work. Bad dream? I nodded, filling a glass from the filtered tap. The usual. Anton watched me for a moment, then rose and crossed to the liquor cabinet, retrieving a bottle of the same cognac we'd shared the night of his father's memorial. This will help more than water. I accepted the glass he offered, our fingers brushing in the exchange. A simple touch that nonetheless sent warmth cascading through me. What are you working on so late? He hesitated, seeming to debate how much to share. Acquisition paperwork. A property on the west side. Business never sleeps? I perched on the edge of the dining table, close enough that I could see the documents, legal language, property descriptions. Nothing obviously nefarious. Not in my world. He removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose in a gesture of fatigue. In that moment, he looked almost ordinary, a tired businessman, rather than the intimidating figure who commanded immediate respect wherever he went. Your world, I echoed, the cognac emboldening me. Are you ever going to tell me exactly what that entails? What you really do beyond owning nightclubs and real estate? Anton studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Would knowing change how you see me? Probably, I admitted. But I'm already living with a man who casually threatens people and has a security team that would make a presidential detail jealous. I think I'm entitled to know who I'm sharing space with. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Fair enough. He moved to stand beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat of him, smell the familiar cologne that had become synonymous with safety in my mind. My father built an empire from nothing when he came to this country. Import, export, construction, entertainment venues, real estate. Some of it strictly legitimate, some less so. Criminal enterprises, I clarified, needing him to say it directly. By American legal standards, yes. He didn't flinch from the characterization. When he died, I inherited everything, the legitimate businesses and the others. I've spent the last decade legitimizing as much as possible, moving capital into legal ventures, establishing Sokolov Holdings as a respected firm. But not everything, I pressed. Anton shrugged, one elegant lift of his shoulder. There are certain services that remain profitable precisely because they exist outside traditional channels. Protection, conflict resolution, asset recovery, intimidation, violence, theft, I translated, watching his face for reaction. If necessary, he conceded, meeting my gaze unflinchingly, though I prefer to consider it justice applied outside the limitations of a flawed legal system. Like with Ryan, I said softly. Something darkened in his expression. He hurt you. He would have killed you. The law would have given him a restraining order that he would have ignored, as men like him always do. His hand rose, fingers ghosting over my throat where the bruises had been. In my world, actions have immediate consequences. It's more honest in many ways. I should have been horrified by the casual way he justified violence, by the glimpse into a moral code that operated outside the boundaries of law. Instead, I found myself leaning into his touch, the cognac and late-hour lowering defenses I'd carefully maintained. And what about me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Where do I fit in this world of yours? Anton's hand moved from my throat to cup my cheek, his touch gentle despite the calluses I'd noticed before. You exist outside it, he said, blue eyes darkening as they held mine. You are not a transaction or an asset or a liability to be managed. He paused, seeming to search for the right words. You're the first person in a very long time who makes me want more than power or control. The admission hung between us, vulnerable in its honesty. I reached up, covering his hand with mine where it rested against my cheek. What do you want, Anton? You, he said simply. However you're willing to be wanted. The last of my reservations dissolved at the raw truth in his voice. I leaned forward, closing the distance between us until our lips were mere inches apart. Show me. For a heartbeat, he remained still, giving me one final chance to retreat. When I didn't, his mouth claimed mine with surprising gentleness. A question rather than a demand, an invitation rather than a conquest. I answered by sliding my arms around his neck, pressing closer as the kiss deepened, heat blooming between us like a long-banked fire suddenly given oxygen. His hands moved to my waist, lifting me effortlessly onto the table, stepping between my knees as months of tension finally found release. "Eleanor," he murmured against my mouth, my name a reverence on his lips. "Tell me you want this. Tell me you want me. I want this," I whispered back, fingers threading through his hair, drawing him closer. "I want you. I have since that first night in your office." A groan escaped him, the sound of restraint finally broken. His kisses grew more insistent, trailing from my mouth to my jaw, down the column of my throat where Ryan's hands had left their mark, reclaiming that space with gentleness, erasing the memory of violence with something healing. We didn't make it back to either bedroom that night. Instead, we christened the dining table, the living room sofa, finally ending up on the plush rug before the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights a glittering backdrop to our entwined bodies. Anton was a revelation, responsive to every sigh and shiver, attentive in a way Ryan had never been, patient in drawing out pleasure rather than simply taking his own. Afterward, he cradled me against his chest, one hand tracing lazy patterns along my spine, the other entwined with mine. "Stay with me," he murmured into my hair, the words carrying weight beyond the immediate moment. Not just in the penthouse, with me. I propped myself up on one elbow, studying his face in the dim light. "What exactly are you asking?" His free hand rose to brush hair from my face, thumb tracing the curve of my cheekbone. "I'm asking you to be mine, Eleanor. To let me be yours. No more separate rooms, no more pretending we're just roommates or employer and employee. I want everyone to know you belong with me." The possessiveness in his voice should have triggered alarm bells after my experience with Ryan. Instead, it warmed me from within, because Anton had demonstrated again and again that he viewed possession not as control, but as protection, as partnership. "There would have to be rules," I said, echoing our earlier negotiation. "I maintain my independence. My job at Vertigo becomes real, not just a cover. I want to earn my place, not be given it because I'm sleeping with the boss." A smile spread across his face, genuine and warm. Counteroffer. "You become manager at Vertigo. You've got the skills and the staff already respects you. It's a natural progression and has nothing to do with us." I considered this, finding no immediate objection. "And the other conditions? Your independence is not negotiable," Anton agreed readily. "I have no desire to cage you, Eleanor. I simply want to share my life with you, to build something together." "Something legitimate," I specified, needing clarity. "I won't be involved in the other aspects of your business." His expression sobered. "I would never expose you to that world. Never ask you to compromise your principles." He sat up, bringing me with him, hands framing my face with surprising tenderness. "I am what I am, Eleanor. I can't change my past or erase certain obligations, but my future, that I can shape. With you, if you're willing." The earnestness in his voice, the vulnerability beneath the strength, made my decision easier than I'd expected. "Yes," I said simply. "I'll stay with you. Be with you." The smile that transformed his face was worth any risk, any uncertainty about the complex man I'd chosen. He gathered me close, sealing our agreement with a kiss that promised protection without possession, passion without control. "Mine," he murmured against my lips, "and I am yours." In that moment, looking into eyes the color of a winter sky, I finally understood what had drawn me to Anton Sokolov from our first meeting. Not just the power or the safety he represented, but the recognition of a kindred spirit. Someone who understood darkness because they'd walked through it themselves. Someone who valued strength because they knew how hard won it could be. With Ryan, I'd been a possession to be controlled and punished. With Anton, I was something to be cherished and protected. A distinction that made all the difference. As dawn broke over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I drifted to sleep in Anton's arms, finally at peace with my choice, with the strange path that had led me from one man's cage to another man's open door. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I didn't dream of hands around my throat or shadows lurking just beyond sight. Instead, I dreamed of blue rooms and gentle touches, of a future built on mutual respect rather than fear. I dreamed of home. 6 months passed with surprising swiftness. Winter surrendered to spring, snow melting to reveal the first tenacious green shoots pushing through soil that had seemed permanently frozen. I'd undergone a similar transformation, thawing, healing, growing in ways I hadn't thought possible after Ryan's systematic destruction. My promotion to manager at Vertigo had been met with knowing smirks from staff who assumed it was due to my relationship with Anton rather than merit. Those assumptions faded as I implemented changes that improved both the customer experience and employee satisfaction, a revamped menu featuring signature cocktails I'd developed, a fairer scheduling system, and a zero-tolerance policy for handsy customers that the security team enforced without question. Anton and I settled into a rhythm that felt both exciting and comfortable. He maintained his business empire during the day, while I took night classes in business management, our schedules overlapping just enough to make our time together precious. Nights were spent in passionate exploration or quiet conversation, learning each other's bodies as thoroughly as we learned each other's minds. The more I learned about Anton Sokolov, the more complex he became in my eyes, a man of contradictions who could be ruthlessly pragmatic in business matters, yet surprisingly sentimental about family traditions. He kept his promise to shield me from the shadier aspects of his operations, though I wasn't naive enough to believe they'd ceased entirely. Some nights he'd return later than expected, tension radiating from his shoulders, and I learned not to ask certain questions. We'd established boundaries and respected them, my independence for his privacy, a balance that worked surprisingly well. I maintained friendships outside our relationship, including a strengthened bond with Mia, who'd been initially concerned about the speed of our involvement, but had warmed to Anton after seeing how he treated me. "He looks at you like you're the answer to a question he's been asking his whole life," she'd observed during a rare lunch date. "It's terrifying and beautiful at the same time." I knew exactly what she meant. There was an intensity to Anton's attention that could be overwhelming. The absolute focus he bestowed, as if nothing in the world existed beyond the space we shared. It was heady and occasionally frightening, but never controlling in the way Ryan's obsession had been. Ryan himself had become a ghostly presence in my past, rather than an immediate threat. According to Anton, he'd left Chicago shortly after our confrontation in the alley, returning to Milwaukee with, as Anton put it, a newfound appreciation for personal boundaries. I never asked for details about what exactly had transpired that night, and Anton never volunteered them, another boundary respected. At least, that was what I believed until the morning everything changed. I woke to an empty bed, unusual for a Sunday when we typically lingered over coffee and conversation before facing the world. A note on Anton's pillow informed me he'd been called away on urgent business but would return by evening. Not entirely unusual. His phone occasionally rang at odd hours with matters that couldn't wait, but disappointing nonetheless. I'd been planning to discuss something important with him, a step I was finally ready to take. I spent the day productively, finalizing next week's schedule for Vertigo, organizing my notes for an upcoming exam, preparing dinner as a surprise for Anton's return. It was nearing 8, the sky outside fading to indigo, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Turn on the news. Channel 7. A chill ran through me as I reached for the remote, an inexplicable sense of dread pooling in my stomach. The television flickered to life, the solemn face of a news anchor filling the screen. Breaking news from Milwaukee, where police have confirmed the identity of a body discovered this morning in an abandoned warehouse. Ryan Daniels, 34, a local business owner reported missing 3 days ago, was found dead of apparent gunshot wounds in what police are describing as an execution-style killing. Authorities are investigating possible connections to organized crime, as Daniels had allegedly accumulated substantial gambling debts with the remote slipped from my numb fingers, clattering to the floor as the room seemed to tilt around me. Ryan. Dead. Execution style. The words echoed in my head, colliding with memories of Anton's promise months ago. Whatever happens with Ryan Daniels, it will be his choices that determine his fate. I was still staring at the television when the elevator door slid open and Anton stepped into the penthouse. He froze at the sight of me, at the news broadcast still playing, his expression shuddering immediately. "Eleanor," he began, setting down his briefcase with deliberate calm. "I can explain. Did you do this? My voice emerged as a whisper, shock muting my usual volume. Did you have Ryan killed? Anton moved further into the room, maintaining distance between us as if approaching a wounded animal. Not personally, no. The careful phrasing wasn't lost on me. But you ordered it. He met my gaze steadily, unflinchingly. Yes. The simple admission hit me with physical force. I'd always known what Anton was. He'd never hidden the darker aspects of his business from me, had merely kept them at arm's length. But there was a vast difference between abstract knowledge and the concrete reality of a man dead because of a connection to me. You promised me, I said, finding my voice at last, anger cutting through shock. You promised no violence. You said I wouldn't have blood on my hands. And you don't. Anton's voice remained steady, reasonable. This was my decision, my responsibility, not yours. Why now? I demanded, rising from the couch, needing to move, to put physical space between us. It's been months. He was gone, out of our lives. Why kill him now? Something flickered across Anton's face. Hesitation, perhaps, or resignation. He crossed to the bar and poured himself 2 fingers of vodka, drinking it in one swift motion before answering. He contacted your parents 2 weeks ago, he said finally. Told them he knew where you were, that you were being held against your will by a dangerous man, that he was coming to rescue you. Anton's mouth twisted in a bitter smile. Your father called me, concerned. We've spoken several times over the past months. The revelation staggered me. You've been in touch with my family, behind my back. I reached out shortly after you moved in, Anton admitted, to reassure them you were safe, to give them a way to contact you if they chose to. They were hesitant at first, your father especially, but we've developed a rapport. My mind reeled with this new information. Anton communicating with my estranged parents, keeping tabs on Ryan even after he'd left Chicago, making unilateral decisions about threats to my safety, all without my knowledge or consent. You should have told me, I said, anger building beneath the shock, about Ryan contacting my parents, about whatever surveillance you've had on him all this time. These were my decisions to make, Anton. My life. I was protecting you, he countered, voice hardening slightly. Ryan was becoming unhinged. His messages to your parents were increasingly erratic, his gambling debts mounting. He was a desperate man with nothing to lose, Eleanor. It was only a matter of time before he made another attempt to find you, to hurt you. So you had him killed. I said it flatly, not as a question this time. I eliminated a threat to your safety. Anton set down his glass with precise control. I would do it again without hesitation. The certainty in his voice chilled me. This was the Anton that others feared. The man who made life or death decisions with cold calculation, who viewed violence as simply another tool at his disposal. I'd known this side of him existed, had glimpsed it the night he confronted Ryan in the alley, but had allowed myself to believe it would never touch me directly. You made me complicit, I said, the realization dawning with sickening clarity. By not telling me, by not giving me a choice, you made me part of this. Anton moved toward me, stopping when I flinched back. You are not responsible for my actions, Eleanor. This blood is on my hands alone. But I'm sleeping in the same bed as those hands, I exploded, tears finally breaking free. I'm loving the man who ordered a killing for me. Don't you see how that makes me involved? Pain flashed across Anton's features, quickly masked. Would you rather I had waited, let him come after you again, perhaps succeed this time where he failed before? I would rather have had a choice, I shot back. Been told the truth so I could decide what level of protection I was comfortable with. This wasn't protection, Anton. This was you making a unilateral decision about my life, just like Ryan did. Different methods, same result. My agency taken away. The comparison landed like a physical blow. Anton actually stepped back, shock registering before his expression closed off entirely. I am nothing like him. Aren't you? I challenged, anger giving me courage. You decided what was best for me. You acted without my knowledge or consent. You eliminated what you perceived as a threat to your possession of me. Each word felt like a knife, cutting between us, severing what we'd built. The only difference is your methods were more sophisticated, your cage more comfortable. Silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken words and mounting regret. I watched emotions war across Anton's face, anger, hurt, and something deeper that might have been fear. When he finally spoke, his voice was controlled but tight with emotion. "I didn't see it as a cage," he said quietly. "I saw it as protection, as love." "Love doesn't make these kinds of decisions without consultation," I responded, my own voice breaking. "Love respects boundaries and agency." "And if respecting your agency meant watching you die at his hands?" Anton challenged, a flicker of his usual intensity breaking through the control. "What then?" The question hung between us, impossible to answer with any certainty. I moved to the windows, staring out at the city lights blurring through my tears, the life we'd built together, the safety, the passion, the understanding I'd thought we shared. Suddenly felt like a beautiful illusion. "I need space," I said finally, turning back to face him. I can't process this while living here, sharing your bed, pretending everything is normal when a man is dead because of his connection to me." Anton went very still, his face paling slightly. "Are you leaving me?" The raw vulnerability in the question nearly broke my resolve. 6 months of memories flashed through my mind. Anton bringing me tea after nightmares, his patience as I learned to trust physical intimacy again, the way his eyes lit up when I entered a room. I loved him. Deeply. Completely. But this was a line I hadn't been prepared to cross. "I don't know," I admitted honestly. "I need time to think, to figure out if I can reconcile who you are with who I thought you were, with who I want to be." He nodded once, the gesture stiff with suppressed emotion. "Where will you go?" "Mia's, for now." I'd already texted her during the news broadcast, receiving an immediate offer of her spare room for as long as I needed it. "I'll still manage Vertigo. I won't abandon my responsibilities. But I can't stay here. Not right now." Anton crossed to his desk and removed a key from the top drawer. "Take this," he said, holding it out to me. "It's to the condo in Lincoln Park, the one we looked at last month. It's yours, purchased in your name only. You can stay there instead of with Mia." I stared at the key, the implications sinking in. "You bought that property? When were you planning to tell me?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I was going to surprise you next week, for your birthday. The deed is in the safe, made out to Eleanor Hayes only. No connection to Sokolov Holdings or me personally. The gesture was so perfectly Anton. Thoughtful yet high-handed, generous yet controlling in its assumption of what I would want. I took the key reluctantly, our fingers brushing in the exchange. "Thank you," I said, meaning it despite everything. "But this doesn't change what happened. What you did." "I know." He stepped back, maintaining the distance I'd established between us. "For what it's worth, I'm not sorry he's dead, but I am sorry I kept it from you. Sorry I made you feel caged." The acknowledgement was more than I'd expected. I nodded, unable to find words that wouldn't either wound him further or compromise my own integrity. Without another word, I retreated to our bedroom, his bedroom now I supposed, and packed a bag with mechanical efficiency. Clothes, toiletries, the textbooks I'd need for classes. Personal items, but nothing he'd given me as gifts. Those I left behind, unsure if I'd ever return to claim them. Anton was waiting by the elevator when I emerged, his face a mask of control that did nothing to hide the anguish in his eyes. "Dmitri will drive you," he said, voice rough with emotion. "I've instructed him to remain at your disposal for whatever you need, for as long as you need." "I can take a taxi," I began, but he cut me off with a sharp gesture. "Please, allow me this much at least. Let me know you're safe." I relented, recognizing that this, at least, was a form of protection I could accept. "All right." We stood in awkward silence as the elevator ascended, a chasm of unspoken words between us. When the doors opened, I stepped inside, turning to face him one last time. "I do love you," I said, needing him to know despite everything. "That hasn't changed. I just don't know if it's enough." Anton's composure cracked then, raw pain flashing across his features. "It was always enough for me." He placed his hand against the elevator door, preventing it from closing. "I won't pressure you, Eleanor. Take the time you need. But know this. There is nothing I wouldn't do to keep you safe." even if that means letting you go. The contradiction in his statement, protection through abandonment, struck me as quintessentially Anton. He removed his hand, allowing the doors to close between us. His face the last thing I saw as the elevator began its descent. Dmitri was waiting in the lobby, as stoic as ever, though I thought I detected a hint of sympathy in his usual impassive expression. He drove in silence to the Lincoln Park address, carried my bag inside, and departed with a simple instruction to call if I needed anything. The condo was beautiful, open and airy, with large windows overlooking the park, furnished with tasteful simplicity that blended my aesthetic preferences with higher quality than I would have chosen for myself. Anton had known exactly what I would like, down to the reading nook by the largest window and the fully equipped kitchen. It should have felt like a gift. Instead, it felt like a gilded cage, more spacious than the penthouse perhaps, but still constructed without my input or consent. I spent the first night alternating between tears and anger, between missing Anton with physical pain and resenting his high-handedness. By morning, exhaustion had dulled both emotions enough that I could function, could shower and dress, and make myself presentable for my afternoon class. Days stretched into weeks. I maintained my duties at Vertigo, where Anton was conspicuously absent during my shifts. Staff whispered, of course, the boss's woman living separately, tension visible whenever his name was mentioned, but Natasha shut down the worst of the gossip with surprising loyalty. "Whatever's between you two is your business," she said one night as we closed the bar. "But for what it's worth, he's miserable without you. Never seen him like this, not even after Katya." I didn't respond, unsure what to do with the information, with the knowledge that Anton was suffering as much as I was. We communicated primarily through text messages, brief, practical exchanges about Vertigo, or the occasional query about my welfare. He respected my request for space with characteristic thoroughness, never pushing, never appearing at the condo, though I knew he must have a key. My parents called 3 weeks after I'd moved out, the first direct contact we'd had in nearly 2 years. The conversation was awkward, stilted with unspoken recriminations about my disappearance, but ended with tentative plans for a visit in the summer. They mentioned Anton only once, my father noting that he seemed like a serious man who cares deeply for you. I changed the subject quickly, not ready to explain the complexity of our situation. It was nearly 2 months after I'd left the penthouse when the package arrived. A small box delivered by courier, requiring my signature. Inside, nestled on black velvet, was a delicate silver key pendant on a matching chain, accompanied by a handwritten note in Anton's precise script, "Eleanor, this belongs to you, regardless of where life takes you next. It symbolizes what I should have given you from the beginning. Choice, freedom, self-determination. The key is yours, as is the decision to use it. I remain, always, yours, Anton." I turned the pendant over in my palm, recognizing it immediately as a replica of the key to the penthouse elevator, the one that granted access to his private domain. The symbolism wasn't subtle, but it was sincere in a way that touched me deeply. Anton, who controlled everything in his world with meticulous precision, was offering me the one thing he found most difficult to give, the freedom to choose him, or not, on my own terms. That night, I dreamed of him for the first time since leaving. Not nightmares of violence or blood, but simple memories of his smile across the breakfast table, his hand warm against the small of my back, his voice reading aloud from Russian poetry as I drifted to sleep. I woke with tears on my cheeks and clarity in my heart. The decision had been forming slowly, over weeks of separation, of reflection on what I could live with, versus what I needed to be whole. Ryan's death still troubled me, the method, the timing, the secrecy, but I'd come to understand that Anton's world operated by different rules than the one I'd grown up in. Justice moved faster, consequences were more immediate, and protection sometimes required preemptive action. Could I love a man capable of ordering another's death? The question had haunted me for weeks. But perhaps the better question was, could I love Anton Sokolov with clear eyes, knowing exactly who and what he was, neither idealizing nor demonizing him? The answer, I discovered, was yes, but only if he could meet me halfway, could recognize that protection without respect for agency was just another form of control. I dressed with care that evening before heading to Vertigo, the key pendant resting against my collarbone beneath my uniform shirt. Anton wouldn't be there. He never was during my shifts now. But Dmitri would report my appearance, my demeanor, as he always did. The message would be delivered. The club was busy for a Wednesday, the VIP section occupied by a group of businessmen I recognized as associates of Anton's, legitimate partners as far as I knew. I supervised the bar with practiced efficiency, my mind elsewhere, counting the hours until closing. At exactly midnight, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. South entrance. Black car waiting. My heart stuttered in my chest, recognizing Anton's method of communication even through the anonymous number. I finished my current task, informed Natasha I needed a break, and slipped out through the staff exit to find the familiar black SUV idling at the curb. The back door opened as I approached, revealing Anton sitting alone in the spacious interior. He looked thinner than I remembered, shadows beneath his eyes suggesting sleepless nights that matched my own. He wore one of his impeccable suits, but his tie was loosened, top button undone, small signs of the strain he'd been under. "Eleanor," he said simply. My name carrying all the weight of 2-month separation. I slid into the seat beside him, the door closing behind me with soft precision. For a long moment, we simply looked at each other, cataloging changes, searching for signs of the connection that had sustained us before. "You got my gift," he observed, eyes dropping to where the pendant would be beneath my shirt. I reached up and withdrew it, the silver catching the dim light within the vehicle. "It's beautiful. Symbolic." "I meant what I wrote," Anton said quietly. "The choice is yours. It always should have been. That's why I'm here," I replied, turning to face him fully. "To talk about choices. Yours and mine." He nodded, tension visible in the set of his shoulders. "Wherever you wish to go. Your penthouse," I said decisively. "We need privacy for this conversation." A flicker of hope crossed his features, before he schooled his expression to neutrality, of course. The ride passed in silence, neither of us willing to begin the conversation in the confined space of the car, under the watchful eye of the driver. Anton maintained a careful distance between us, though I caught him watching me when he thought I wouldn't notice, his gaze hungry in a way that had nothing to do with physical desire and everything to do with simple longing for connection. The penthouse was exactly as I remembered it, though subtle changes spoke of my absence. A single wine glass by the sink instead of 2, books rearranged on shelves, a throw blanket missing from the couch where I'd often wrapped myself during late-night conversations. Anton moved to the bar by habit, then paused, glancing back at me. "Would you like a drink?" "No," I said, removing my uniform jacket and draping it over a chair. "I want clarity for this conversation." He nodded, abandoning the bar to face me across the expanse of the living room. "I'm listening." I took a deep breath, organizing thoughts I'd rehearsed for days. "I've had a lot of time to think about us, about what happened with Ryan, about who you are and who I am." I met his gaze directly. "I still love you." That never stopped, not even when I was angriest. Relief flickered across his face, quickly tempered by wariness. But love isn't enough without trust, without honesty." I moved toward him slowly. "What you did, having Ryan killed without telling me, making that decision unilaterally, broke something between us. Not because he's dead, but because you didn't trust me enough to involve me in a decision that directly affected my life." Anton didn't flinch from the accusation. "I wanted to protect you from having to make that choice, from the burden of knowing. That wasn't your decision to make," I countered. "My burdens are mine to bear or reject. When you took that choice from me, you treated me as something to be sheltered rather than an equal partner." He was silent for a long moment, considering my words with the same intensity he brought to everything. "You're right," he said finally. "I've spent so long protecting others, my family, my people, you, that it became instinct rather than choice. I saw a threat and eliminated it, the way I've always done." His eyes met mine, naked honesty in their blue depths. I didn't consider that the protection itself could become another kind of cage. The admission, so contrary to his usual certainty, his unwavering conviction in his own judgment, stunned me. "You understand why I left then?" "I understand," he said softly. "I don't agree, but I understand." And I respect your perspective. The words seemed to cost him, the concept of respecting a viewpoint that contradicted his own clearly unfamiliar territory. I closed the distance between us, close enough to feel his warmth, but not touching. If I come back, things would need to change. Real partnership means shared decisions, especially about matters that affect both our lives. No more unilateral actions justified as protection. Hope bloomed in his eyes, quickly contained. You're considering returning. I'm considering building something new with you, I corrected. Something based on honesty and mutual respect, not just passion and protection. Anton's hand rose, hovering near my face without touching, waiting for permission in a way he never had before. I can't promise perfection, he said with brutal honesty. I am what I am, Eleanor. My world operates by certain rules, certain necessities that won't always align with conventional morality. I'm not asking for perfection, I replied, leaning slightly into his touch, granting the permission he sought. I'm asking for inclusion, for trust, for you to see me as strong enough to handle the truth, even when it's ugly. His palm cupped my cheek with exquisite gentleness. You are the strongest person I know, he murmured. It was never about your capacity to handle difficult truths. It was about my need to shelter you from the darkness in my world, in me. I don't need sheltering, I said, covering his hand with mine. I need honesty. Can you give me that, even when the truth is ugly or frightening or might drive me away? Anton was silent for a long moment, his thumb tracing the curve of my cheekbone in a familiar gesture that sent warmth cascading through me. I can try, he said finally. It goes against every protective instinct I possess, but I can try. For you, for us. It wasn't an unequivocal yes. Anton was too honest for promises he wasn't certain he could keep. But it was real, a genuine commitment to growth rather than empty reassurance. I leaned forward, resting my forehead against his chest, feeling his heartbeat accelerate at the contact. That's all I'm asking, I murmured. That we try. Together. His arms came around me slowly, tentatively, as if expecting rejection. When I melted against him instead, a shudder ran through his powerful frame. I missed you, he whispered into my hair. Every moment of every day. I missed you too. I tilted my face up to his, finding his eyes damp with emotion he'd never have shown anyone else. Even when I was angriest, I missed you. His mouth found mine with aching gentleness, a kiss of reconnection rather than passion, of promise rather than possession. When we parted, he rested his forehead against mine, eyes closed as if memorizing the moment. Come home, he breathed, the words barely audible. Please. Home. The words still carried such weight, such meaning. I thought of the condo in Lincoln Park. Beautiful, comfortable, mine alone. Then I thought of this penthouse, with its memories both painful and precious, its connection to the complicated man before me. On one condition, I said, pulling back enough to meet his gaze. We redecorate. Make this place ours, not just yours. A fresh start. A smile spread across Anton's face, genuine and warm in a way few people ever saw. Anything you want. Paint the walls pink if it makes you happy. I laughed, the sound surprising us both after months of tension and separation. Not pink, but definitely some color. This place is like a luxury hotel. Beautiful, but impersonal. I never needed it to be personal before you, he admitted, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. It was just somewhere to sleep between business obligations. You made it home. The simple truth of his words touched me deeply. Anton Sokolov, feared and respected throughout Chicago's underground, had found home in a bartender running from her past. There was poetry in that, a symmetry that felt right despite everything that had happened. I'll need time, I cautioned, unwilling to pretend all wounds had miraculously healed. Trust takes longer to rebuild than it does to break. We have time, he assured me, hand finding mine and squeezing gently. All the time you need, and we did. The following months weren't easy. We argued, we negotiated boundaries, we sometimes retreated to separate corners to lick our wounds, but we talked. truly talked, in a way we never had before. Anton shared more of his business with me. Not the illegal aspects, but enough that I understood the pressures he faced, the decisions he had to make. I shared my fears about becoming complicit in violence, about losing myself in his world of power and control. Slowly, carefully, we built something new together, a relationship founded on hard-won honesty rather than idealized illusions. The penthouse transformed with splashes of color and personal touches, becoming a true home rather than a showplace. Anton delegated more responsibilities to trusted lieutenants, carving out time for us to build a life beyond the demands of his empire. Ryan's death remained a shadow between us. Not a barrier anymore, but a reminder of what could happen when protection became control. I visited his grave once, alone. Not out of love or even forgiveness, but acknowledgement of the complex path that had led me from his arms to Anton's. I left nothing behind but the last vestiges of fear he'd instilled in me. My parents visited in the summer as planned, their initial wariness toward Anton melting under his determined charm offensive and obvious devotion to me. By the time they left, my father was exchanging whiskey recommendations with him, and my mother was extracting promises for holiday visits. A year to the day after I'd returned to the penthouse, Anton proposed, not with grand gestures or public declarations, but with quiet certainty as we sat on the terrace watching the sun set over the city that had brought us together. "Marry me," he said simply, producing a ring I recognized immediately as Katya's, an heirloom his mother had given him months ago, according to the confession that followed. "Be my partner in all things, as you already are in everything that matters." I looked at the man before me, powerful yet vulnerable, dangerous yet gentle, commanding yet increasingly willing to compromise. He wasn't perfect, neither was I, but we'd built something real together, something that acknowledged the darkness in both our pasts without allowing it to determine our future. "Yes," I said, extending my hand for the ring, for the commitment it represented. "Partners in all things." His smile as he slipped the ring onto my finger was worth every painful step of our journey, every tear shed and argument weathered. This wasn't the fairy tale ending I'd dreamed of as a girl. There were too many complications, too many moral ambiguities for that. But it was real and hard-won and ours. I'd run from one man's cage only to find another man's door standing open, not to perfect safety or unambiguous happiness, but to a life lived with eyes wide open, choices made with full awareness of their consequences. It wasn't the ending I'd expected when I fled Milwaukee with bruises hidden beneath makeup and terror dogging my steps. It was better. It was true. It was ours. And as Anton pulled me close, his lips finding mine in a kiss that sealed our agreement, I knew that sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about perfect people finding each other, but broken ones healing together, not despite their scars, but because of them.